Part 2 on that chapter 21 on the generation of biochemical energy, we need to go over some of the definition. What is metabolism? It's actually the sum of every single chemical reaction that takes place in an organism. Looking at here, where most reactions occur, what we call a metabolic pathway can be linear or cyclic or spiral. When you look at this on the very far left, you have here the reactant A. With the help of enzyme number 1, you can get the product B that can be converted to product C with enzyme 2, D, E, F, enzyme 3, 4, 5. Cyclic sequence will be where you have A goes to B, C, D, involving enzyme 1, 2, 3, 4, and may have an effect on the first as the number 1, which was the reactant. And the spiral will be here where things are not as straightforward, but eventually you get to a final product. So a couple of definitions you need to know as well. What is catabolism? Catabolism is where you break down food molecules and those release biochemical energy. Anabolism is where you are going to build larger molecules from smaller pieces. Easy way to memorize catabolism. Think about a catastrophe that breaks things down. Okay, so this is here the summary. Larger molecule goes through breaking down through catabolism, smaller molecule, and releases energy. And then you will need energy to build up larger molecule from smaller molecule. That is what we call anabolism. Looking at here, metabolism and energy production. So we're going to look at those chapter after chapter. The next chapter is about carbohydrate metabolism, then we look over lipids and eventually protein. So basically you all start with ingesting food. That would be then the first stage, which is digestion. Then we're going to see what happens. Well, you need to have the production of what we call acetyl coenzyme A. Then they will go through stage 3, the citric acid cycle, and 4, the production of ATP through oxidative phosphorylation and the electron transport chain. So we're going to look at this, and I'm right away telling you I want you to know that figure very well. I'm not going to ask you every single step of the citric acid cycle or everything about the electron transport chain, but I want you to understand the different steps that exist. So first of all will be digestion. Where digestion, well, we have first, I wish I had put that here, chewing up. Chewing up with your teeth will make breaking down the food in smaller bits. Those smaller bits will increase the surface area so you can have action of the different enzymes that exist here in the saliva, the stomach, and even small intestine to pretty much break down large molecules into smaller ones. Carbohydrates are going to go down to glucose and other monosaccharides. Protein will be broken down into amino acid and triacylglycerol. Lipids will see a little bit more complex, but then here, when you look at lipids, they go to glycerol plus long chain of carboxylic acid. We call those fatty acids, and those small molecules can then be transferred into the blood to be carried through the cells where the energy is needed. The next step is what we call the acetyl coenzyme A production. And I have the next slide that really shows you a summary because I really would like you to understand how it works. Part of it is outside of the mitochondrion, takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell, doesn't require any oxygen. But pretty much what we're going to look at is look at the digestion and going through different pathways that will move the carbon atom into 2 carbon acetyl group. Those are going to be further attached to coenzyme A, and that's a bond that exists, and that is an intermediate in the metabolism of every single food molecule. So I do like that figure because I think it really gives you a better perspective. We're going to look at those. Please pay attention first. This is like the pinkish side is the cytosol. Cytosol is the outside part, liquidish part in the eukaryotic cell, and then you have in yellow the outline of one mitochondrion. Now you look at the crystals and you look at what's going to happen, it looks very complex, but actually it's not that much. The first step will be you have on the very far left, the blue box, one glucose, a sugar, that is going to be split into two pyruvate. So you start with a 6 carbon compound and make 2 times 3 carbon compound. We call those pyruvate. Well, what happened there, you first need to introduce 2 ATP. So it takes 2 energy molecules to break down that glucose. Eventually you have 4 ATP made. So the net production of ATP will be 2. You have 4 made minus 2 necessary to start, so 2 ATP are going to be the product. This is outside of the mitochondrion, doesn't require any oxygen. And then you have what we call intermediate, the 2 NADH. And I'm going to briefly explain those. I just would like you to memorize mostly glycolysis. Excuse me. First step, no oxygen required outside of the mitochondrion. Net amount of ATP is 2. Glucose is transformed into 2 pyruvate, and I have 2 NADH as intermediate. Then there is what we call like a little bit of the grooming intermediate phase, where you have pyruvate oxidation to make 2 acetyl coenzyme A. Again, you see on the top there is 2 NADH, which will link to and get used at the very, very last stage, which is the oxidative phosphorylation and the electron transport chain. That is the purple square you have on the very far right. And then when you have those 2 acetyl coenzyme A, each of them, please remember each of them, so you have 2 that are made from 1 glucose, so each of them will go through the citric acid cycle, also called the Krebs cycle. Each turn of that cycle gives you 1 ATP. But because you have 2 acetyl coenzyme A, bottom line, the net product will be 2 ATP that are going to be produced by substrate level phosphorylation. Still some intermediate, 6 NADH, 2 FADH2, those will interfere with the last phase on the purple box, and that is where you have the bingo. 26 or 28 ATP molecule that will be generated, and that is where you need to have that oxygen molecule. So stage 3 of your textbook, citric acid cycle, also called the Krebs cycle from the person who discovered it. As I said, it's just here where you're going to have many different steps. I'm not going to ask you to memorize all the steps. I just want you to remember every cycle gives you 1 ATP, so you have 2 acetyl coenzyme A, so bottom line you have 2 ATP that will be made. And then you have intermediates such as NADH and FADH2. Stage 4 is the ATP production, which are going to be where electrons from the reduced coenzyme are passed from the molecule to molecule down an electron transport chain. That energy is very important. That's the way you can harness the maximum amount of ATP. But at the end of the process, they will need to combine with oxygen to produce H2O, which is the water. So when you look at what we call the cellular respiration, which is the process to make that energy, what we need a sugar, and then what we're going to have with this, we're going to break it down with those different steps, and eventually what will be released will be energy, and you're going to have carbon dioxide and water. So when I say the sugar, well, sugar is the food that you need to ingest, but you also need oxygen, so it's sugar, oxygen that needs to be taken in, and then making energy and releasing carbon dioxide and water.